Siem, Nutschalaka Siem, Haishka. Family and friends of family, thank you for being here. I'm Swilcanum. I'm from the Lummi Nation up near north of Seattle, Washington. I'm here to recognize and acknowledge the indigenous people of this land. I'm here because the organizers realized that it had to be done in a really awesome way. I was sitting here before, I had some things I wanted to do and say, and a beautiful conversation happened at this table. Liz and Dr. Makita. We were talking about magic. And I know they invited me here because I'm a musician, but I'm also an amateur magician. So I'm going to show you a little bit of magic. And there's a reason behind this, trust me. And I didn't practice this, but all right. One, two, three. The neat thing about this is, since I'm an amateur magician, I'm going to tell you how I did it. See, when this finger got close to this hand, right? This finger went down real quick, and this finger popped up real quick, right? And then I did it again, and it was just like the same thing, only in reverse, with the other finger going down, and then this finger popping up. That's how it works. It's magic. But you see, the real magic behind this is that this finger is actually attached to this hand, this arm, this body, this mind, this heart, this arm, this hand, and this finger. Transformation happens when we recognize and acknowledge that we are a part of the whole. Because the organizers of this conference wanted to recognize and acknowledge the indigenous people of Turtle Island, where we are so luckily a part of. In this conversation, it came up that I needed to acknowledge something. I'm really lucky to be Native, because from the beginning of time, my elders, my ancestors, prayed for my well-being, that my needs would be met. And you know what? I'm here. I have survived the best efforts of genocide. The neat thing about those prayers is that they would pray for everyone that I would meet. Hi, everybody. They would pray, I'm waving. Yeah, there we go. Good. They would pray for everyone I would meet, that their needs would be met. You see, right where we are, there was a sustainable economy from the beginning of time based on two things, generosity and gratitude, the potlatch, the giveaway, the powwow. Right where we are is an answer to our ancestors' prayers. You are who you are. I am who I am. And we are who we are. It's an honor to be here today. It's an honor to share this moment with you. There's a piece I wrote. It's about a gathering in 1983. Native elders met at the University of Lethbridge to address substance abuse on reservations and reserves throughout North America. They looked at all the causes and effects, and they concluded the hurt of one is the hurt of all, and the honor of one is the honor of all. I'm honored to be here today. My honor is your honor. There's an abundance of honor just waiting to be recognized and acknowledged. It's transformational. We all become a part of the whole when that happens. And it can heal us all. When I was a child, I dissected a frog and it hurt. I'm Lummi, I'm Lactamish. That means I'm of the place of frogs. When my parents were passed out, one on the couch and the other on the floor, it was a chorus of frogs that sang for me a lullaby. When I was a child, I dissected a frog and it hurt, but oh yes, I got an A for the day. Now, the reason why I'm saying that is that there's so many ways to be who we are. How we know who we are is from our culture. My ancestors prayed for your well-being, for your prosperity, because if you had everything you needed, why would you take anything from me? That's why we are here today. This is a piece I wrote. It's about that simple notion. It starts with one note. That notion is, what if I honor the skills, gifts, and talents that got me through the most difficult times of my life? Perhaps that might inspire someone else to do the same. And so on, and so on. This is called the honor of all. And with that, I'll conclude today. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. One last thing. My music helped me to survive the traumas of my childhood. And my music is a direct product of a well-supported public school music program. Thank you.
Thank you, Sewell Chan. We are all part of one whole. Welcome, Grantmakers for Education community. We have all waited for this moment for so long. Before the pandemic, I didn't need readers to talk to you, so I can't even see you all out there because I want to be able to look at my notes. We've changed, but we are here. We are finally here together after 3 long years. We're here because of our connection to education. We're in the business of helping people learn and thrive. That means we're in the business of human connection. We know this kind of human connection is essential to how we do our work. So I just want to take a moment of gratitude that we're able to be here, for the energy in this room, for the conversations with so many of you that I've already gotten to have, and for all of the conversations we'll have over the next 3 days. We all did plenty of soul searching through these pandemic years about our purpose and the work that we do. I went into the pandemic calling myself an educator and an introvert. And I came out recognizing that I'm a community builder. I've now spent 15 years of my life building communities like this, almost 5 here, helping people be the change they seek in the world, and connecting to one another to get there. It's such a privilege, and pieces of this work can only happen in person. If you're a community builder, this room is what you see in your dreams. So at this stage, I've decided I'm an extrovert. I'm thrilled to be here with you in community. You'll see that there are lots of stickers to put on your tags. We have red and we have yellow for folks who are less comfortable connecting. And there's green. Green is for I'm ready to connect. So I went a step further than a green dot. I've got a green jacket on. I'm all green. I'm hoping to get lots of hugs from folks I haven't seen in years. And I'm hoping that this celebration of community is as special for all of you as I know it's going to be for me. So thank you all for being here. I just couldn't be more excited to kick off these events. And we have a really, really incredible keynote to kick things off. So now it's my honor to introduce Trabian Shorters. So Trabian has the resume you'd want to steal. He is actually all the things. He was a successful tech entrepreneur. He's been a New York Times best-selling author. He worked in philanthropy at the Knight Foundation, so he knows all of our work. And most important, he's the originator of the asset-based frame on student potential. So to get us underway in a spirit of hope and belief in young people, I'd like to call Trabian to the stage. Thank you, Trabian. This is exactly how I wanted to start. So far, it's going so well. Thank you. So amid all of the conversation of learning loss, which is important and we'll have it here, that's exactly the frame we want to bring to this conversation. So thank you. And now we want to ground ourselves in the local context. So I have the honor of introducing Sewell Chan. Sewell is the editor-in-chief of the Texas Tribune. but he also comes to us with a coastal background. He's been at the LA Times, he's been at the New York Times, he's been at the Washington Post. He's stewarded through Pulitzer Prize winning journalism. And now he is here in Texas, and he's going to lead a panel of educators, students, activists at all levels of the education system to just share a little bit about their experiences here and now in Texas. So Sewell, please join us on stage.
Good morning, everyone. It's such an honor to be here today at Grantmakers in Education. Just by way of reference, I've been in my job at the Texas Tribune exactly 1 year, having started a year ago today. And I'm really happy to be in such an be part of such an important community, and actually several of our funders are represented here at Grantmakers in Education, so thank you. I was really inspired by Trabian's talk just now. We think a lot in journalism about narratives. We think about framing. And I have been thinking about exactly what Trabian said about asset framing versus deficiency framing. And it's something we're trying to balance as journalists, right? I mean, we have a job to kind of chronicle society's inequities and power imbalances. We also have a job, I think, to provide a sense of agency and hope. Because if people think that there's no prospect for progress or change in a democratic system, then they're going to resort to cynicism or despair or even worse. And so that's something I took very, very clearly from this morning's messaging. I wanted to start with a few remarks before getting into the heart of our discussion. Just to give the lay of the land here a little bit in Texas. You know, Texas is, of course, a land of superlatives. 30 million people, second largest in the US in population and area. No other state has gained as many residents in the last decade, adding 2 members to the US House, the only state to do so in the next Congress. No other state has seen the breakneck pace of growth that we're seeing in Texas, particularly in its suburbs. No state produces and uses as much energy or is as central to the future of the climate transition discussion in America. I also want to point out that we're right now in what is called the Texas Triangle. This is the kind of mega region, if you will, that includes Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, Austin. This region is 2/3 of the state's population and 77% of Texas GDP. This is also the part of Texas that is the most dynamic, that is changing the most demographically and changing the most politically. Texas, of course, is unfortunately also a place of breathtaking inequality. We are the largest of 11 states that have not expanded Medicaid. 18% of Texans are uninsured, twice the national rate. 1 in 5 Texas children live in poverty. The prevalence of firearms deaths nearly doubled over the past decade. 95% of population growth in Texas has been among communities of color, and yet, in last year's redistricting, communities of color lost electoral representation and strength. Polls suggest that Texans, on the whole, although being more conservative, are actually less right-leaning as some of their elected leaders, particularly in areas such as abortion. A majority of Texans support some access to abortion, but that's obviously not the direction the state's leaders went in. In education, in 2019, 7 in 10 fourth graders were not proficient in reading, and 7 in 10 eighth graders were not proficient in math. There has been legislation to improve student-teacher ratios in pre-K, and to improve bilingual education, and to expand postpartum Medicaid coverage. But in the next legislative session, which starts in January, school choice, school vouchers, and more public funding for private and religious schools is certain to be on the agenda. At times in the past, it has produced an unusual coalition of urban school districts and conservative rural districts which do not wish to see further consolidation of their districts and a weakening of the public schools in rural areas. So there's very, very interesting cross-partisan coalitions. Having laid out that context, I want to introduce the incredible panel we have today. And yes, the theme is hope, and we're going to spend the next hour and change focusing on just that. Immediately, the speakers I'm going to introduce from your left to right in alphabetical order. First, we have Dr. Angela Valenzuela, who's a professor at UT Austin, expert on curriculum and instruction, as well as education, leadership, and policy. She's the director of the Texas Center for Education Policy, previously taught sociology at Rice University, and is the author of the award-winning book, Subtractive Schooling, U.S. Mexican Youth and the Politics of Caring, as well as Leaving Children Behind, How Texas-Style Accountability Fails Latino Youth. Dr. Valenzuela serves on many task forces and boards, including her leadership role in the National Latino Education Research and Policy Project. To Angela's left is Mr. Hjamil Martinez-Vazquez, who is a bilingual educator and instructional support specialist for the dual language program in Crowley Independent School District, and founder of Adelante, an equity group for Latina and Latino educators. Hjamil has taught multiple grades, 3rd through 6th, in the area of reading and writing, and was selected in 2019 as Campus Teacher of the Year at Mary Harris Intermediate. This year, he got the same recognition at ACE Demonstration and Design Lab at Hargrave Elementary. Both schools are in Crowley ISD. Next, we have Samantha Greenleaf, who is an educator, founder of Educators in Solidarity, an assistant principal in the Austin Independent School District right here in town, also is a literacy instructional coach and has taught ESL to 2nd, 3rd, and 5th graders, a teacher since 2013. And then last but not least, I'm particularly happy that we have a student on the panel, Shrika Paramasivam, who is a student, in fact, a high school senior at Westwood High School here in Austin, in the Round Rock Independent School District. Shrika is an inaugural member of the Million Girls Moonshot Flight Crew. I'm going to ask about that. Through Flight Crew, she was able to share her experiences with the aim of increasing equitability in STEM and engineering. And Shrika is interested in engineering research and advocacy and hopes to pursue the intersection of these disciplines in the future. Welcome, all of you. So the first question I have is the goal of this panel is to frame the moment we're in. So I'd like for each of you to talk about seeds of hope and sources of hope in your direct professional experience at the moment. Angela, can we start with you?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Such a wonderful panel to contemplate the great things that are happening right now in the Austin, Texas area. And I mean, I think that the children that we work with are often termed as in deficit-based language, where they're viewed as less than, they're other, they're immigrant, first generation, some of them undocumented, low income, working class. The pandemic started to give us new language on frontline workers that was very positive and asset-based. But for this community that we work with in Austin, Texas, mostly in East, South, and some parts of North Austin, they've been under assault continuously, either through ICE, anti-immigration forces that have yanked families, created separation for a long time now, or due to gentrification that's pretty profound in East Austin. And so it's a very vulnerable community, yet what we've done, we as a community that is in partnership with the Austin Independent School District and the MIS Barrientos, Mexican American Cultural Center, is create a school, a Saturday school that has provided instruction precisely to this community that again gets constructed, I think narrowly, in the spirit of what Trabian was sharing before, narrowly as experiencing learning loss and as deficient in so many ways, when what we're experiencing is all kinds of successes in working with these children who are in a Saturday school program named Academia Cuautli, designed for them and with them with a co-constructed curriculum that brings qualified dual language educators to offer culturally rich instruction that resonates with them, including Danza Mexica, Aztec dance, as an important part of our curriculum. And just with the idea and aspirations that they're eagles. Academia Cuautli means Eagle Academy. And it's inspiring to think of how children can soar to great heights, and for them to really internalize that once they know that they're not strangers. Even if they've migrated, they've come from a long way away, but their ancestors have always been here. Our ancestors migrated freely up and down the continent. And I think once they have a deeper understanding of who they are, what their identities are, multiple. I mean, they're Latino, immigrant, male, female. They're Afro-Indigenous. They're Latino, that Latinos, Latinas that are of different, from different places. We realize that when we come together, we are strong and we are happy. And so there is this idea at Academia Cuautli that we can co-construct a different narrative, a different reality that is asset-based, but really culturally anchored in the experiences of the children's and the communities. And when you do that, the children are able to see their parents as knowledge bearers that have important knowledge, when schools often teach them the opposite or treat parents in the opposite way, as if they have nothing to offer. Nothing could be further from the truth. But you're not going to get there unless you really are doing the, sort of like the granular hard work of being in community and working closely with children. We've been in operation since 2014, so we're in our 9th year. And so grateful to Grantmakers for Girls and Humanities Texas, and of course the Austin Independent School District, that through Title I and Title III dollars has been able to fund this initiative. I'll stop there. I could say some more. This is my favorite conversation to have, but it's just really neat to be part of an initiative that's just expanding and growing, and that is getting the attention of a lot of folks in the grant-making world, and finding some model. We're not just doing something that's kind of discreet, or that we're a vendor. That's not the spirit of this at all. The spirit is partnership and authentic caring, what we call authentic cariño, or affection. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Angela. Hjamil, Seeds of Hope.
First, thank you for the invitation. I think the hope is in the classrooms. Whatever the noise is outside, learning loss, teacher shortage, they are true, all of them in different stages. But the hope is in the classroom, because the kids don't care. The kids don't care that there's a teacher shortage, they go to school. The teacher who is there from 6 in the morning until 6 in the afternoon, or 8, if it's me and my wife, they don't care about the teacher shortage. They suffer it, but they don't care, because the hope has to be in the classroom. So whenever we talk to teachers, and I have the experience of talking to, in my new position this year, I've talked to over 50 teachers almost every week, on and on, visiting them or talking to them online. The hope happens whenever the teacher goes and tunes that out and cares for the students. So for me, the hope is always where there is knowledge being exchanged, when there is culture being exchanged, when there is stories being exchanged. So that reminds me of a story last year. One of my 5th graders, who was my student at 3rd grade, was my student at 4th grade, was my student at 5th grade, comes to me and says, at the end of the year, "Thank you. And I said, why? And she said, thank you because you stayed. You didn't leave. And that in itself is where hope happens. So that's why we have to spend money on teachers.
A perfect segue to your fellow educator, Samantha.
I really appreciate that, and I love that this is the title of this panel is Planting Seeds of Hope, because the narrative that we're hearing about education is all negative now, not even in the media, but on social media and amongst educators and in communities, and though all those things are real, it is a very trying time for a lot of communities and for educators. This year specifically, I am seeing so much joy and energy and a rejuvenation in schools because we've learned to appreciate the value of community and the need for that. This is my second year as an administrator, and this time and this period compared to where we were last year, where daily policies were changing, safety procedures were changing, constantly just trying to figure out if we were doing the right thing and protecting kids the right way. And of course, safety and health is always a top priority, but now when we're able to bring community together and be thoughtful about it, and how do we want to bring back old traditions, how do we want to celebrate what makes our community unique, that's what we're hearing most frequently from families and students, is how excited they are to be back together and get to experience time together. Something as well in this time is that we've really had the privilege of getting to understand different students and families' contexts and their experiences these last 3 years. Of course, we've had this collective experience as a whole, but everyone has had their unique ways that they've battled and challenged and thrived and survived these past 3 years. And when in my role, where I get to spend a lot of time having conversations with parents, there's always something they mention that's happened in the past 3 years of how it's impacted their child's development. And so I think that it's really helped us as teachers and educators really think about kids as individuals and understand their context, and know that we have to do that in order to do our jobs effectively. Kind of thinking about education as a whole, now there is a lot of burnout as you're hearing, and that's another reason I'm so grateful for the title of this panel. The organization that I'm on the leadership team for, Educators in Solidarity, it's a group working to build our collective capacity as anti-racist educators. And that phrase, collective capacity, is that same idea of community. And we have our conference coming up this upcoming weekend, and the theme is rejuvenation as an act of resistance. And I think that now's the time to be doing that, is to think about how do we rejuvenate individually and collectively for our students and communities.
Thank you. Give a hand to Educators in Solidarity. Great. Shrika, a certain pandemic broke out during your freshman year in high school, and now you're a senior looking forward to graduation. Tell us a little bit about the seeds of hope in your experiences, in that of your peers, and about your story of resilience during these last, 3 years.
It's very hard as a student, not to look at what we lost through the pandemic. A semester of my freshman year was taken off completely, and there was no effort to kind of retake that education. And we're here in our senior year now, and one of the biggest seeds of hope that I have is being in person with other students. I think a lot of people underestimate what students see in our educational system and what problems we see, but we do recognize and identify all of these problems, and there's a lot of hope in the way that we band together to fix these issues. And I see that in my own classrooms, where we notice that there's a lack of teachers, but we're still willing to help other students and our peers in order to fill these gaps.
What do you most hope for from your college experience?
I hope that there's more equitability in the educational system. I want every student to be able to learn in a way that is supportive to them. And I also, through the pandemic, I saw that there was, a lack of support in the way that students learn. Like, everyone learns differently, and I think that online school really did emphasize that, and I hope that there's a movement towards really understanding that each student is individual.
Thank you, so perceptive. Thank you, Shrika. Now, Texas crossed a really important milestone this past year. In fact, just a few months ago, the Census Bureau, through the American Community Survey, estimated that for the first time, Latinos are now the largest demographic group in Texas. Latinos account for about 40% now of the Texas population, slightly greater than the non-Hispanic white population, which is also about 40%. And I'd like to ask Angela in particular, you know, because you have focused so much on Latino education, you know, what does this milestone mean for you?
What this milestone means is that we have a lot of work to do. A lot of work. And I think also we need to come together as communities, as communities of color. We need to have dialogues across difference. I think that it's used to instill fear in a lot of people. What you just said, some people will clap, others will go, ugh, you know, like, I don't know how I feel about this. And maybe feeling decentered. Well, first of all, Latinos aren't in power, so, you know, even still, it's interesting that people feel decentered and threatened, right? And so I think that the solution to that is what I'm saying, is that we need to have dialogues across difference. And I think that once we do that, and we put a face on the Latino community, we put a face on the African American community, Native American. I think we also need ethnic studies. I'm also a strong advocate at the state level. Someday it'll just be called a good education, right? But right now it's called ethnic studies, and it's, and what really doesn't get understood sufficiently is that curriculum is the reproduction of consciousness, right? And so we're a product of the books that we read, of the stories that we tell, and what we learn. And so we need to expand that. So Texas is wanting to constrict that when knowledge has expanded at an unprecedented level in human history. So I think we need to take notice of what's happening politically in these struggles at the state board level, the Texas state legislature, be involved, but on the ground, what we need to do is humanize, you know, humanize these demographic trends so that it's not just numbers, but it's real people, real lives, and ultimately it's our future, it's the children. And there's a lot of issues, we know. I mean, the LA City Council stuff, right, is like comes to mind. I think people are thinking about that. And it is not correct to assume that all Latinos are racist as a result of that. That is not a correct assumption. In fact, they do not represent me. And we need to always stand in that gap as Latinos, you know, when this happens to our African American brothers and sisters, and it should happen in the other direction as well. Those are the kinds of sensibilities and dispositions that I think we need to cultivate in a democracy.
Yeah. Very well put, and I think zero-sum thinking is an enemy of democratic practice. You know, thinking that if some group benefits, then others are somehow losing. I think that is such a, you raised it such a, I was just mentioning the demographic change kind of as factual news, but you're entirely right that, you know, that fact is going to get applause from some and perhaps anxiety for others that's then exploited by politicians. So that's really interesting. Hjamil, how would you, you know, what does this milestone mean for you?
It's a number. As a bilingual educator, it means I still have a job. No, but it means more than opportunity. It means a challenge, and it actually means hope, because in the struggle for our equity as teachers of color within administrative independent school districts in Texas, I think then there is a hope that this particular growth will actually lead to representation at that level, which is not necessarily there. Austin had a Latina who is now in Dallas ISD, but I come from a district who is 30-something% Latino, and all board members, none of them are actually Latinos. So, and they have never been one. And we have a strong dual language program. And it just happens in my district, but it happens in every district, in a lot of districts in this state. So it's a challenge, but it's the opportunity for that representation. Not representation just by numbers, but representation by cultural awareness, representation by culture and equity in the classrooms, at the school, at the district level. So whenever we talk about equity, a lot of people say, well, we need one more Latino here, one more African American here, and then they start counting people, and we turn into quotas. But whenever we talk about equity, we actually are talking about changing the structures of how we do business, how we educate our kids, that we are not taking a curriculum that doesn't involve culture awareness and then put it in front of the kids, and then put a teacher just to read it, as we have been doing in this state for the last 2 years with the Amplify movement. So we have to understand that the way that we do equity is the way that we transform the system in order to have everybody's voices not just represented, but valued, trusted, and in charge.
Hjamil, I want to stay with you for just a moment. You live and work in the Fort Worth area, and of course Tarrant County, which includes Fort Worth, is one of the fastest growing counties in the United States. It is demographically changing, it's kind of exploding in size, it's also politically changing.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about how that kind of breakneck growth, how you're seeing that on the ground as an educator.
Well, two things. Political is being dismantled by the rearrangements of the house. So I was one house, and then they move it to a different house. So with the rearrangements of the house.
Oh,
so
you mean the state house
the state
districts
houses,
or the U.S. house?
So the state houses. So that rearrangement is actually making a whole bunch of difference as we struggle in the educational system, because different representatives will actually push for different things for your community. So that is actually important when a lot of people think, well, they're changing because in order to have more Republicans, less Democrats, that is good. But for us, it's actually the way that we do business in the educational system is affected. Our growth, our booming growth is going to be affected if our representative doesn't represent the community. If our representative lives miles and miles away from where my school is, that representative has zero to inform my community. And the school that I worked for the last 3 years, and my wife works now, is in our community. I live within my community. It was 55% Latino. But our representative lives in Mansfield. This is a distance away from Crowley ISD and Fort Worth. So we have to understand that that particular change, the booming of our community is booming. Yes, it's thriving as a community. The business are thriving, all this stuff. But educationally, it's going to affect if we do not pay attention to it. If we do not, as teachers and as parents and families, we do not recognize that that's going to affect that growth, internal growth, that educational growth, that cultural growth that we need to put forward as a Latino community.
You know, gerrymandering is obviously, and redistricting are topics we follow really closely, but you really bring to life that it's ultimately about representation. That's very, very powerful. Tell us about how the boom feels from an instructional and pedagogical level.
Ooh. So, because of the boom, we had a growth with bilingual education, for example, within Fort Worth ISD and Crowley ISD, Mansfield. So a whole bunch of boom within the Metroplex, which I would be Dallas, Fort Worth area. There's been a boom in dual language and bilingual education. So and a lot of districts who did not have a program now have to have a program because of the boom of that population. But I think the most important thing to analyze is how the rest of the curriculum is addressed? How do we address the administration aspects? How our administrators are actually getting to know the community? How the curriculums that we buy as districts and the books that we buy and the textbooks that we buy are representative or not representative of what we do. Quick story, I came to a classroom the other day, they were teaching Amplify, which is CKLA, for those of you who are not from Texas. And in a second grade classroom, they were teaching about the Phoenicians, and they were teaching about how people were dead from different kinds of wars and all that stuff. This is a second grade classroom. People were bored, they were falling asleep, and they had zero to recognize their story in this. Why? Because we are not making the effort of using this boom that we have in order to recognize that we need resources that reflect our communities, that reflect who we are as a people.
Samantha, you spoke very movingly about, very effectively about the conversation around education. And that, you know, when it comes to teachers, you know, there is so much of this deficiency framing. I'm curious what you think, well, I'm curious what you think we in journalism can do, but more broadly, I'm curious about where you would like to see the conversation shift.
That's a great question. I think that it's a great privilege and a great responsibility to be a teacher, and I feel like during the last several years, society as a whole has seen that. They've seen all the roles that teachers play, and all the things, because we were in homes with families for a large part of that. And so I think there was a great shift in understanding the work that teachers do, but also teachers understanding the roles that families play and that there should be a partnership there. I don't think if we hadn't had the last 3 years in this pandemic, I don't think there would be that understanding that it should be a true collaboration and partnership. And so on the flip side of that, though, teachers now realize how much they've been doing, and they haven't had that realization of how much they've had on their plates, and now they're being told it frequently and reflecting on that. And so I think where I would like to see the conversation shift is how do we recognize that but not make it where we're just talking about all these burdens and they should get paid more, but how do we think about how do we support them and give them time back and give them opportunities to reflect. When we have changing demographics in Texas, even if students, the demographics are changing, most teachers still look like me. So how do we have conversations and support where we are learning to decenter whiteness in curriculum and supporting teachers through that? Because in the pandemic, we were forced to see the inequities in our communities, and they had been there the whole time, but we were forced to kind of see them. And so how do we, moving forward, support teachers in doing that really hard work? Because it's not enough to say this is how your students are performing, or things are really hard, we get it, but how do we provide sustainable support for them to be able to reflect on their students' lived experiences, and how do we support them at a systemic level? So that's where I would love to see some conversation shift.
Now, Samantha, Texas has more than 1,200 school districts, and confusingly, they often are not synonymous with political boundaries, so it can be a little bit hard to figure out what's what. When we hear about school boards in the news in Texas, it's often around critical race theory, note the air quotes. It's around sometimes restrictions on books and libraries. It's around a lot of kind of these culture war issues. You know, what role should rank and file instructors play in debates around school governance and frankly the political side of education?
Well, I think that I have conversations about this all the time. I think that the way that laws are written and broadcasted in Texas, it's coming from a place of fear and putting our most vulnerable students and communities, our Black and brown students, our English language learners, our transgender LGBTQ plus populations, our most vulnerable students are being put as targets. And something that has been really interesting as an administrator to see is how the way the laws are written so vaguely, it's very open to interpretation. So depending on what school district you're a part of, very urban, liberal communities interpret it one way, rural communities interpret it a different way, very conservative communities would interpret it a different way, and it's very, and that's the way the law is intentionally written to allow that interpretation. But communities that are more suburban, that have changing demographics and have more diversity, that's where you're seeing a lot of tension come in, and it's very distracting from what is important in schools, and it's putting the conversation on something that's not the reality of what's happening in the classroom. When I mentioned kind of systemic support for teachers, in my school district in Austin ISD, we have a social and emotional learning and cultural proficiency and inclusiveness department, and the funding for that, and that it exists, that it exists is crucial, but also that it provides a framework for our teachers to build community through social emotional learning, but do so in a way that's culturally responsive and inclusive, and making sure that we have a framework of how to talk about things, because students are not nervous, and students are curious, and they want to have conversations about hard topics, but teachers, because they know what a responsibility they have, a lot are operating from a place of fear that they don't want to say the wrong thing. So I'm grateful in my district that we have that to provide a framework and support for teachers in that work, and it also can meet individual contexts of communities, but a lot of districts do not have that. And so that's something that I would love to see grow, so that politics does not, when it's meant to be distracting and causing fear, that it's not going into classrooms in that way.
Thank you. Shrika, we have, of course, an election coming up next month for state as well as federal offices. And of course, we have a legislature that's meeting in January. What are the top things you'd want voters to know from a student perspective? And if you were king, what would you like the legislature and the governor to do starting in January?
I think as a student, like the biggest thing that I want them to know is accessibility to quality education, also culturally competent education. Just very recently, like in one of my classrooms, we have a new teacher who came in without obviously educational licensing because of the new rules that have been made up to help teacher shortages, and there's just such a lack of cultural knowledge, and many of these teachers and substitute teachers will say things that are offensive to students, specifically regarding gender and transgender students, and I think there needs to be a move to suppress this, because this affects students so much when an older person, a substitute teacher, says something that really disregards their entire identity, and we need to move towards more inclusive language, for sure.
And what would you like? What would you like those in power to do?
Could you repeat the question?
What would you like those in power to do?
Oh, well, I would like them to introduce rules that emphasize the social justice framework, as well as just kind of emphasizing equitability.
Great. Fantastic. Now, do we have time, Celine, for audience Q&A? 3 minutes. Why don't we try to get in just 2 or 3 questions? Is that possible?
I cannot see, but now I can see.
Don't be shy. Okay, well, hearing none, I'd like each of you to, last chance? Okay. I'd like kind of each of you to, what's the one takeaway that you would like the philanthropic community to know about what you're doing in education and what kind of support you need?
Okay, well, I'll go first. I'm sorry, I had an allergy attack here just now in front of everybody. But the philanthropic community has been so helpful to us at Academia Cuautli, and schools can't even support us in its entirety, the school district, and so it's so valuable to have the partnership but we need support. It costs money. I mean, we do a lot, you know, on a volunteer basis, mostly on a volunteer basis. But even then, you know, we're working with, you know, wanting to ourselves be expansive in curriculum, teacher professional development, offering summer camp to kids. And so just, you know, with the assistance of this community, there's just so much more we can do and impact the classroom. I'm totally with you. The whole idea is about impacting the classroom. So that, but you can do that in various ways, and one way is through community-based education and in partnership with our teachers and our school districts. Thank you.
Thank you. Hjamil?
Center your ears on the voices that matter, not on the noise that doesn't matter. I always experience whenever I do this or people invite me to speak, they always ask me about the topics, the main topics, teacher shortage, learning loss, all this stuff. But those things are true and are important, but they are not centered in what is actually happening. So that's why I appreciate the presentation, because it's centered on what is actually happening. It's centered on what is the asset of it. And the asset are the students, the asset are the teachers doing the work. Programs are important, and I love programs that do that. But whenever you're listening, listen for those voices. Those voices are going to tell you what is happening in where the learning is happening or where it's not happening. Outside in the districts, outside that, they don't know. So center on those voices. Center on listening to those voices and put it at the center of your mind. And then the second thing is include many voices. Talk to counselors, talk to doctors, talk to everybody that is involved. There's nothing worse as a teacher to hear, oh, we care for the SEL. And the SEL is, they give you a presentation for an hour on how to do meditation. That is awesome. Not. I can do that on YouTube, okay? It's giving time. It's offering time to reflect, to decompose, to decompress. Sometimes decomposing is too. But to decompress, it is that time. It is not we are going to give you an SEL, the 2 days that you can take. But whenever you take them, why are you taking them? What are you going to do? And if you know a teacher, ask them, what is the worst thing? Is to prep for a sub. So listen to teachers, listen to educators, listen to medicine doctors and other people who are inside of the schools, because they are going to tell you exactly what is needed. Thank you.
This makes me think of earlier in the school year, we ended up having some funds shift in our budget, and so we had $10,000 available, which is a lot of money for us. And so we have a weekly survey, and we send out to teachers. We have $10,000. What do you think it should be used? Most commonly, the answer was, I don't know, because teachers are never offered money, and they rarely have the opportunity to dream about what they could do with it. There was a couple of just offshoot creative answers, but the second most common answer was fix the copier, and we want a new copy machine. And I think that showed me a lot that teachers know what's right in front of them and they want to solve problems. We did get the copier fixed, but not with these funds. But it really showed me, like, teachers can work magic in their 45 minutes they have as they're planning during the day. And when there's something that's a hindrance to them being successful and efficient, it changes everything. And so I think really thinking about that and how do we maximize time and resources and in ways to make them feel more successful supporting students, I think is so valuable. And being aware of what the needs are, I just definitely echo what you were just saying about understanding voices and having relationships with those that you are supporting and understanding how you're making an impact and having a long-standing relationship. Knowing that data only tells one story, and how are we interpreting that, and how are we seeing understanding that educators are experts at what they do, students are experts at what they are doing, communities are experts on their communities. And so how are we bringing all those voices in to make sure that we are best serving would be kind of what I think about whenever thinking about funding going forward to be best utilized.
Fantastic. And finally, Shrika.
I think it's so important to also center student voices and truly listen to what students need. I think a lot of times it's what you think that students need instead of what students actually need. So giving spaces where students can actually speak out on their own needs, and then also just kind of giving spaces where students can reflect on what you're doing for them as well.
I have learned so much from this panel, and I come away inspired. Thank you, Angela, Hjamil, Samantha, Shrika. Let's give them a hand.
Thank you all. This was fantastic. I want to say, and I had told the panel in advance, I had lots of calls from people outside of Texas in our membership saying, how can you go to Texas? The diversity and complexity of Texas is the diversity and complexity of the United States. We need to engage this, and you all have just done such a great job helping us really understand your context and the place we are right now. So thank you. I just still can't believe we're here. It's so great. So I just have a few concluding remarks. Number one, I want to thank all of our sponsors. You really got us through these past few years and have really come on strong this year. We appreciate it. I want to single out Ascendium and the Hewlett Foundation as our two ambassador level sponsors. So thank you all, and thanks to you two specifically. I also want to let people know there are things you can be doing when you want to take a break. So we are building a mosaic out in the front lobby area. Also, you can join the live version of ULCA's podcast, The Future of Smart. We have some prompts for you, and so dive on in there and be a part of that. And then finally, I would like to personally invite everyone to join us at the Umlauf Sculpture Garden this evening for our host event. We're really looking forward to it. It'll be exciting and fun to get off-site, and I think this is a really kind of cool, keep Austin weird type of spot, and so I'm really excited to be there with all of you. And again, green for hugs. Yay. All right, let's move on to our breakout sessions. Thanks to everyone.